What's up, everyone? It's Bones here. In what I think may be one of the coolest decks I've done on this channel to date, we'll be resurrecting some vampires. But first, if you're a fan of in-depth combo videos, new set coverage, and fun stuff that we occasionally like to do on the channel, then sink your teeth into those thumbs up and subscribe buttons and energize yourself to combat any silver bullets that may come your way. For this first combo, I want to show off the idea of the deck, and it starts with Vampire Ghost. It's a relatively new card that reads if this card is normal summoned, you can send one other vampire card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard as a cost, add one level 4 or higher vampire monster from your deck to your hand, and if you do, send one level 2 or lower vampire monster from your deck to the graveyard. So not only is the ability to add and send really good, but it's just the fact that it also sends as a cost when you're first activating the effect upon normal summon, which is amazing in my opinion. But its second effect reads, during the main phase quick effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard and pay 500 life points as a cost. Immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon one vampire monster, and you can only use each effect of Ghost once per turn. So the ability to get that extra normal summon is also really important to what this deck wants to do, as you'll see momentarily, but we're going to start this one with Vampire Ghost plus any other vampire card, and we're going to use the effect of Ghost, getting ourselves the Scourge, sending ourselves the Retainer, then use the Retainer, get itself back as we can send the Ghost to the graveyard, use the effect of Retainer on the field in order to add ourselves a copy of Vampire's Desire, activate the Desire, and then we'll send ourselves a Vampire level 6. It could be any other level 6 that you may want to play, but I do play the Red Baron just because it's better going second, and we'll then be able to use the effect of Ghost in order to get our extra normal summon, as we'll then be able to tribute summon for the Scourge, use the effect of the Scourge, pay 1k so that we can bring back the Baron, and now we have rank 6 access as we'll go into Beatrice. Now, I know at first glance this looks like a really fragile combo, and it's because it is, but at the same time there are a lot of extra sub-engines that you play, or things that really go along well together that can help you play through hand traps and different disruptions, and I'll talk about that later as the video goes on. For this specific combo, you'll just be able to see the raw power that you're going to get from this single combo alone. Now, we're going to use the effect of the Beatrice in order to send the Mayakashi trap. It's the Ghost meets Girl, and I forget the rest of it, but tribute one Mayakashi or Shiranui Synchro or Link monster. That part isn't important to what we're going to do here. Neither player can special summon monsters from the hand, deck, or extra deck for the rest of this turn. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one of your banished zombie monsters as a cost, return it to the graveyard. You can only use one Ghost meets Girl effect per turn, and only once that turn. So this is really strong for this particular deck, especially once we get this stuff on January 18th, because what it means is that we'll be able to use the Beatrice, we'll be sending the OCG card that we get on January 18th, the transaction rollback, pay half your life points, then target one normal trap in your opponent's graveyard, except transaction rollback. This effect becomes that normal trap's effect when that card is activated. So for this particular combo, that effect isn't important, but this next one reads, you can banish this card from your graveyard and pay half your life points, then target one normal trap in your graveyard, except transaction rollback. This effect becomes that normal trap's effect when that card is activated. You can only use one transaction rollback effect per turn, and only once that turn. So the idea here is that you're going to copy the Ghost meets Girl trap effect in order to stop your opponent from being able to special summon from the hand, deck, or extra deck for the rest of the turn. Keep in mind that it also locks you, but you'll be able to do this on your opponent's turn. And the cool thing is that because you are copying the effect, it is kind of like Diamond Dude, where you send the spell, and then if you get the spell card, for example, Destiny Draw, you would get the draw too and wouldn't have to discard because the cost isn't part of the effect. There is one more additional thing that we do get from this though. So we're going to use the effect of the rollback, which will lock our opponent and ourselves from summoning from the hand, deck, or extra deck. And then we can use the effect of the Ghost meets Girl in the graveyard because we didn't use any of its effects this turn. We only copied it. And then we can put our Retainer back into the graveyard for some follow-up. Now this second combo reveals some of the more important stuff that we're playing in this deck, and we're going to use the MZMI in order to send our familiar and get ourselves the King Sarcophagus. We'll then be able to draw one. As you see, we have a fake trap, which is just going to be any other card that you get, and we're going to pitch it in order to send ourselves the Happy. Then we'll be able to revive the MZMI and the Happy, as we're then going to go into the Vampire Zombie. And keep in mind, this second combo is also just for the concept of the deck. I really won't be going too much into comboing here because it is RNG based, and I want to leave that to the plethora of hands that I'll be doing in this video. So we'll use the familiar now, which will allow us to send the zombie vampire, and I think how the Horus cards work with the vampire archetype is really nice, because since the Horus cards are always getting you into zombie vampire, you can use your retainer or familiar from the graveyard and send that zombie vampire to the graveyard so you can revive them and get those searches. But we'll be able to use the familiar here, as we'll then be able to add ourselves the Scourge. We'll then tribute summon the Scourge, as we'll be able to get ourselves back a zombie from the graveyard, or rather a vampire, as we're then going to go into the SP Little Knight. Now, I would like to point out that if you actually mill like real cards in your deck, what you do may change, since you probably will get a summon from the zombie vampire, which will give you an extra body, and if that extra body happens to be something like Retainer that gets you a search, you can continue from there. There's also stuff like Unizombie that we play, but with that, I'll take you on to the next one. Now, this will be the final combo before I get onto the test hands, and this is more of a situational combo in the deck, and it's something that may not happen a lot. The truth is that you can search out the Desire, and we only do play one Desire in the final deck list of this. I still show it because it's one of those plays that you're going to want to know, because it's going to help you in some matchups, especially post game 1. So we're going to be able to send the familiar to the graveyard as we target the retainer. We'll then be able to use the effect of the familiar in order to revive itself, sending the retainer. Then we'll be able to get its search, as we're going to get ourselves the Baron, use the effect of the retainer, which will give us the ability to get that search from the retainer as it special summons, and then we'll be able to get ourselves the Vampire Domination. And this is what I mean by it being an option that you have for different sort of matchups that struggle to play versus counter traps, or maybe you just want to protect yourself from something like Evenly if you aren't able to mill something from your opponent's deck, which makes this not able to revive whatever they have in the graveyard and stuff like that. As I'll also explain how you can remove this from the field as well later on in the video, so that they don't just crash into it. But with that said, I'll take you on to the test hand. For the test hands, I'm going to do a bunch of different kinds of hands that you can get in this deck, because the concepts of everything is still kind of fresh, and I don't think it's been explored too often. It's something that I just want people to kind of see for themselves so they can learn it. And we're now going to be able to start here by normal summoning the Vampire Ghost. You don't want to use the MZMI first, as we're going to be able to send the retainer and then add ourselves the Scourge as well, as we're then going to use the effect of the familiar reviving itself, sending the ghost, use the effect of the familiar. This will give us the ability to get the addition of the Baron. Now we can use the effect of the MZMI, pitching the Baron, which will get us the King Sarcophagus, and now we can get that draw, which gets us another copy of Econ. We'll use the effect of King Sarcophagus, pitching the Econ. We'll send the Happy, as we'll then be able to revive the Happy along with the MZMI, go into our Zombie Vampire, use the effect of Zombie Vampire, as we'll mill 4 from each deck, as then we'll revive the familiar. And I'm not going to use the opponent's graveyard for any of these combos, as it will differ depending on the opponent. So I'm going to restrict myself to using my graveyard only for this video. So we're going to continue here by using the effect of the Vision Resonator that we sent to the graveyard off of the Zombie Vampire, as we also hit a Mizuki, which is really nice, as we'll then be able to get ourselves some rank 1 access, or a link 2, depending on what you want to do. But I'm going to go into the Sylvan Princess Sprite. We do hit a copy of Imperm, which gives us an extra interruption during our opponent's turn. We'll then be able to bring back the retainer, sending the Zombie Vampire, use the effect of the retainer, getting ourselves the Vampire Kingdom. And this is another very important card to this strategy now. And it's funny because this is a card that a lot of vampire decks chose really not to play because of the downsides that it had to it, because of Grace being able to help your opponent rather than really help you. But we're going to use the effect of the Vampire Ghost, and I would also like to point out that the Grace wasn't even a quick effect, so that didn't help either. But we're going to use the Scourge now, as we'll then be able to revive the Baron, activate our copy of Crimson Gaia, as we'll get ourselves back the Vision Resonator so that we can special summon it. And you do play into Nib kind of hard. There are counters that this deck has, but I'll go over those later. As we're then going to go into the Beatrice, we'll use the Beatrice, which will give us the ability to send either the copy of the Mayakashi trap, or if you're playing TCG, you can send the Mudora. And for the rest of this video, I will be using TCG once January 18th hits. There may be some slight differences that you can adapt to once we do get transaction rollback. So we're going to be able to use the Mizuki now, bring back the Baron, and now we're going to go into our Baron de Fleur, as we'll then be able to activate the copy of Vampire Kingdom now. We'll set the Imperm along with the Econ. We'll go to our opponent's turn, and the moment that your opponent does something that you want to destroy, what you can do here is use the effect of Beatrice, send yourself the Kelbeck, and this will be how you trigger the Vampire Kingdom, as you'll be able to mill 5 cards from each deck, including your opponent, which means that Vampire Kingdom triggers, and you get that destruction effect, as well as another send for a retainer, which turns into follow-up, and we still have the effect of Baron, we have the effect of enemy controller. We also have the ability to bypass that and go for the transaction rollback Mayakashi trap play if you want to do that as well. And you're also protected by Baron, which really helps. Now, for this next combo, this is one of those hands that looks kind of good, but it isn't. And the reason I say that is because the Vampire Kingdom and the Scourge still are pretty bad to draw. In some hands, they may help, but in hands like these, where the engine pieces that you have are kind of supplementary engine pieces rather than real starters that the deck has, like MZMI and Vampire Ghost, this is just what you can get off of it. And we'll use the effect of the 1-for-1, pitching the retainer to get ourselves the familiar, use the effect of the familiar in order to get ourselves a search, as we'll be able to get ourselves the Vampire Ghost, normal summon the Ghost, as we can use its effect in order to get ourselves the Baron, and then we can send the retainer, as we'll then be able to use the retainer pitching the Baron, use the effect of the retainer in order to get ourselves an addition for the Vampire's Desire, as we'll then be able to use the effect of familiar, sending the Ghost to the graveyard, then use the effect of the Desire, as we'll be able to use its effect in order to send the familiar to graveyard, making it level 1 so that we can go into the Sylvan Princess Bright. We'll then send an MZMI as we failed to hit there. We'll use the effect of the Ghost in order to get that extra normal summon, tribute off the Sylvan, as we'll then be able to get the revival for the Baron, and then we'll be able to get into the Beatrice this way, but first we'll summon out the Vision Resonator. We'll then use the effect of the Beatrice, which will give us the ability to send the Mizuki. The Mizuki will then give us the ability to revive the Baron. You can revive whatever else you want here if you want to go for a link play. I'm just showing that you can also revive the Baron if you want to go for a Synchro 8. From this point, we're going to be able to use the effect of Vision Resonator. We'll then be able to use the effect of the Crimson Gaia in order to get ourselves the Vision Resonator back to hand, and then we'll activate the Vampire Kingdom. And like this, we can end our turn on that. And of course, this combo is much stronger after January 18th when we get transaction rollback, because this isn't really a great hand. As you saw, we had to tribute summon for the Scourge. We were going to end up playing the Vampire Kingdom, so there really wasn't a lot to combo with here. But still, you're able to make something. Now, for this next hand, we do reveal that I am running Crossout, and MZMI and Ghost are just the heart and soul of this deck, in my opinion, as you're just able to do so much. Same thing with the King Sarcophagus. As we're going to activate it, we'll then be able to revive the Happy along with the MZMI. We'll then go into our Zombie Vampire. And another great thing about the Horus cards is how they special summon. So the cool thing is that you can save your normal summon for the Ghost or the Unizombie if you see it. But we'll normal summon the Ghost. We'll then be able to send the Retainer, as we'll get ourselves the copy of Scourge, sending the Familiar. Use the effect of Familiar, sending the Ghost, as we'll then be able to use the Familiar, as we'll then be able to add ourselves the Baron. Use the effect of the Retainer in the graveyard to revive itself. Go into our Vampire Sucker, as we can then use the effect of Ghost, tribute off the Zombie Vampire, and now we'll also be able to get a draw 1 off of the Sucker after we revive the Baron off the Scourge. So that's really nice, as well as we do get the Vision Resonator. We'll go into our Beatrice. We'll then be able to use the effect of Beatrice in order to send our Mizuki. We'll then be able to revive the Baron off of the Mizuki. You then have a Link play, or you can go into Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, or any other rank 8 or level 8 synchro play that you may want to go for. Then use the effect of the Vision Resonator to get the Crimson Gaia, activate the Crimson Gaia to get back the Vision Resonator, and then from here you can activate the Vampire Kingdom. We'll be able to set the Crossout and the Imperm. You can keep the Crossout in hand depending on what game it is. If it's game 1, you may want to keep it in hand. If it's game 2 and you've already sided and you're protecting your board against something like Evenly, Lightning Storm, or whatever, then you can set it as well. This next hand shows what happens when you have a starter along with other combo pieces like the Crimson Gaia that aren't relatively too great. And again, we have 2 bricks with the Scourge and the Vampire Kingdom. And the nice thing is that you do have space to play going second card, so you'll almost always at least see 1. So we're going to be able to bring back the Retainer, off-sending the Baron. We'll then use the effect of the Retainer, getting ourselves the Desire. Use the effect of the Desire in order to bring back the Scourge, as we'll send the Ghost. Use the effect of the Scourge in order to bring back the Baron. And that's something important to note that you can do if you have to send your Scourge to the graveyard. Desires can always bring it back. But we're going to use the effect of the Crimson Gaia now in order to get ourselves a Vision Resonator. We'll then be able to special summon out the Vision Resonator, go into our Djinn Buster, as we'll then be able to go into our Beatrice, and then from here you can use the effect of the Beatrice in order to send the Medora. You can send the transaction rollback or whatever. And I also would like to point out, you've now seen a level 1, or a rank 1 and a rank 2 in this deck, and the consistency of it is actually pretty frequent, because say that you have Vampire Retainer and Vampire Familiar on board, then it means that if you have access to Desires, you can change their levels. What that means is that if you target the Retainer and you send a Familiar, or if you target the Familiar and send a Retainer, then you make their levels the same, allowing you to go either into a rank 1 or a rank 2. And I'll show what I am playing in the deck profile, as there's a lot of options that you can do with the rank 2 pool, as you might know because of Sprite. Now for this next hand, we have another crazy hand, and these are the more fun ones to play out in my opinion, because when you can combo with vampires, you can really go off. And the cool thing is that the combos don't really feel linear. There's a lot of different approaches and boards that you can take. We're going to go and send our Familiar. We'll then be able to send our Ghost for the Familiar, as we'll then be able to revive the Familiar, use its effect on board in order to get ourselves the Baron. We'll then use the effect of Retainer, pitching the Baron, as we'll use the effect of the Retainer on field in order to get ourselves an add for the Vampire Kingdom. We'll then use the effect of Ghost in order to get that extra summon for the Scourge. Use the effect of the Scourge to bring back the Baron, giving us the Beatrice access. Now we can use the effect of the Imseti, sending the Mudora, and that's just a crazy send, but we'll also get ourselves a draw, activate the King Sarcophagus, send ourselves the Happy by pitching the Imseti, use the effect of the Crimson Gaia as we activate it here to get ourselves the Vision Resonator. We'll then be able to bring back our Horus stuff, as we'll then special summon out the Vision Resonator, go into our Vampire Zombie, use the effect of the Vampire Zombie. We'll mill 4 from both sides, as we'll then be able to use the Kelbeck depending on if you would like to or not. I'm just going to here for the extra resources in the graveyard that we can get. We'll then go into the Sucker, we'll then go into the Baron. We can then use the effect of the Beatrice in order to send ourselves a Mizuki. Use the effect of Mizuki, get yourself whatever you want back, which will end up getting you another draw. And then from here you can activate the Vampire Kingdom, and you can pass to your opponent with this. Now do keep in mind, you don't need that extra draw from the Sucker. You can just go into the Mask or whatever SP. You can just send your Beatrice along with the transaction rollback, the Mayakashi trap card, so that you can lock your opponent out like that. But I am trying to focus on the TCG right now. With all of the combos out of the way, we can get onto the deck profile, and the first thing that I would like to point out is that you do play a lot of one-ofs, which can kind of be a downside to the deck, because things like Fraulein, the Scourge, the Baron, Change of Heart, which you play because you have the ability to make whatever your opponent's monster that you take level 8 so that you can go into the zombie vampire, or you can do the same thing with Sheridan. You can turn it level 6 if you have the Scourge or Baron to rank away with it. But the cooler thing is when you change of heart something and you have the MZMI, then you don't even need to send your happy if you don't have the resources for it. You just use the change of heart, steal your opponent's monster, go into the zombie vampire, and I think that's really cool. You'll also notice that there is a side deck for this that I want to show off first. I'll go over the options after. The next thing that I would like to point out is the space for going second cards that you have, because even while playing the two crossouts and the Called by the Grave, you have stuff like the change of heart. You also have the Druid Swarm, and even the Kelbeck can be a going second card as well. Another ability that this deck has with going second, which is pretty nice, is just the ability to bring out beaters like Horus and Happy, and then you can also get yourself extenders in the graveyard that way, which is really nice. You see, it's really not that hard to combo with this deck. Now, another thing that I would like to point out is the one copy of Vision Resonator with the one copy of Crimson Gaia. I know a lot of people play this engine at 2-2, but this felt way too cloggy for what the deck wanted to do, so I bumped it down to 1-1, and if I had to be honest, it's been perfect since. At least I haven't had a problem with it. Outside of that, I would like to go over more of the side deck. As you see the 3 copies of Evenly just for removal, we have our crossout targets with the Bestial Magnahut because that's something that this deck is still vulnerable to, as well as Droll because you do a lot of adding Imperm on your Vampire Ghost if you don't have MZMI or anything like that can also kind of suck. And there's also the Nib, which can be a pretty big hit to this deck if you aren't prepared for it, as well as the Shifter. And the other thing that I would like to point out is you saw me earlier summon out the Djinn Buster. The other option that you have is that you can go into your Gigantic Sprite, bring out the Ibli, go into whatever you want to, and then you're then going to be able to Ibli lock your opponent, which is really nice. And also, if you do have your Baron on board, you can stop your opponent from attacking you that way, as you can just put it in defense position, and if you have a Link monster face up on the field like Vampire Sucker that you used earlier in the turn to draw, it just means that you can pop it, get it out of the field, try to establish your win that way. Then you'll see that we also have the 2 copies of Anti-Spell, just a good going first card. I did choose to add the 1 copy of Thrust and the 2 copies of Talons in order to side deck Assault and the Called By for going second, so that you could help yourself break boards, but also the Thrust is able to add stuff like Lightning Storm, Harpy's Feather Duster, Change of Heart, and the Mind Control. Again, Mind Control, like Change of Heart, is just one of those cards that can help you rip apart your opponent's board by being able to rank away with their stuff going into Vampire, Zombie, or Sheridan. So it's a really cool utility for particular deck. Now, I would like to go over all of the options that we do have. You'll see that we aren't playing the Vampire Fascinator, and I felt like Dark was just easier to make, and it also accomplishes the goal of being able to special summon from your opponent's graveyard, which is using one of your opponent's monsters, which is what I mentioned about the Zombie Vampire and the Sheridan earlier. You'll see in this one, I actually have the Djinn Buster, and it's because it doesn't have a side deck. But if you do have a side deck, you're going to play the Gigantic Sprite for the Ibli. Another cool thing that I would like to point out is the Sulkius. If you do play the Sulkius, if other vampires come out that are better than this and actually have good effects going first, don't rely on their normal or special summon, one thing that's really cool that you can do is play the Sulkius. You'll have the Vision Resonator, which will allow you to go into the 100 Eyes Dragon, and then you can copy the effect of whichever vampire were to come out, continue your play from there. So something that could have future implications, or it could have none whatsoever. I just thought it was worth pointing out. Then there's also the Axel Synchro, which can get you into Baron easier if you don't want to play another level 8. The truth is that even with Unizombie, they don't come up a lot, but when they do, you do have options, and that's what the Axel is here to provide. Then there's also the Scarlight. The Scarlight is kind of cool because it also works with the Crimson Gaia, especially going second and late into time and stuff like that. But we then have the Drudge, which I would like to point out. Say that the Beatrice were to get banned because of transaction rollback in our upcoming ban list. What that means is that you can play Drudge, and since you will be sending cards from your opponent's deck to the graveyard with Zombie Vampire anyways, you can still get off a really sacky way to win off of that. Then the Vampire Grace is another option if you don't want to play the Red Baron. Again, I just think the Red Baron is better going second as far as being able to resolve its effect goes. And there's the Recital Starling, which is another rank 1 that you can play if you don't want to play the Sylvan Princess Sprite. There's also the Fucho that you can play for the Goose if you would like to play that. But if Crow does become staple in any of these upcoming formats, then Recital Starling could be the way to go. There's also the Necro World Banshee and the Zombie World. If Beatrice stays around, you can just send this. If you're playing against Flu or Dragon Link or whatever, Zombie World is just really good against those kinds of decks. And I was playing the Vampire's Domain for a short while. I just don't think it's worth it because you're usually searching out your kingdom, and if you aren't searching out your kingdom, you're either getting your counter trap or the desires, and it's really nothing else. It just ends up being an extender that can be nice at times, and either way, the Vampire Ghost nets you that extra normal summon regardless. The only thing that you really lose on is the life point gains, which could come up here and there, but with a combo deck like this, you're really trying to win on turn 1. Finally, we have the Rollback. Rollback will probably be an integral part of this deck moving forward as long as Beatrice does not get banned. That's kind of why I wanted to make a video on this deck, as I do think that it will get a lot better, and even if it's not some meta giant, it's just a fun rogue option that's different to other stuff that we have now, and can do really cool things on its own, as far as being able to steal your opponent's monsters, use them for your exceeds, link plays, and stuff like that, which is just really cool in my opinion. With all of that out of the way, I'll get onto the card by card, as we have the 3 copies of Imseti, we have the 1 copy of Happy, the 2 copies of King Sarcophagus, the 3 copies of the Vampire Ghost, the 1 copy of Domination, the 1 copy of Vampire's Desire, the 1 copy of Vampire Kingdom, the 1 copy of Change of Heart. We then have the 1-for-1 Crimson Gaia, Vision Resonator, Druis Worm, Baron. We then have the Forge, All-In, which is another hand trap, and that's just kind of nice. But we then have the Familiar, we then have the 2 copies of Retainer, we then have Unizombie, Mizuki, Kelbeck, and Mudora. We then have 3 copies of Droll, 3 copies of Enemy Controller, which is specifically necessary in this deck in my opinion, because not only can you steal your opponent's monsters, but you also have such ease to do it with Vampire Retainer, the Familiar, and stuff like your Horus cards reviving themselves and stuff like that. Also Druis Worm, which you just can happen to sack yourself into, send it to the graveyard, get that removal, steal something from your opponent, then use it for your Vampire Zombie or your Sheridan, or a Link 2 play or whatever. Then you have your Called By, your 2 copies of Crossouts, we then have the 3 copies of Imperm. Round out the main deck. Onto the extra deck, we have the Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, we then have the Baron, the 1 copy of Sylvan Princess Sprite, the Gigantic Sprite or the Djinn Buster. We then have the 1 copy of Beatrice, the 1 copy of Sheridan, Girsu, Hope, Vampire, Zeus, Typhon, SP, IP, Vampire Sucker, and Dark to round out the deck profile. One last time, for those who need it, the side deck, we have the Ibli, the Nib, the Shifter, and the Magna Hut are all cross-out targets, the Mind Control, Harpy's Feather Duster, Lightning Storm, Thrust, the 2 Talents, the Anti-Spell Fragrance, 3 Evenlies to round out the deck profile. For everyone who's made it this far, I'd like to thank you for watching and for the 600 plus subs. Truly appreciate your support. Monetize the channel, giving us access to supers and memberships. It means that more awesome stuff is on the horizon. Get the channel membership, just click on the description down below, and there will be a link that takes you there. You'll also notice a free Discord link that I've made for us too. If you want to support me as a content creator, even if you can't donate supers or get a membership for the channel, clicking on those thumbs up and subscribe buttons help a lot too. For those wondering, I do plan on making updates to the channel as the support on the channel grows. Anyways, I hope to see you on the next one. It's Bones, signing